What's up, guys? We have a special episode once again. We have Peter Alper from Insta.Canadiens. You could check out his content on Instagram and also on Twitter. Today, we have a interesting topic that we're going to be discussing about, and that is the Montreal Canadiens prospect pool. As we all know, they're probably a top five prospect pool in the league, and we're going to be breaking down our top five prospects that we think will have a huge impact, a part of this rebuild that Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton are building or attempting to at least build, and hopefully get us back to the Stanley Cup Finals. So, Peter, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you for having me, boys. I've
Oh,
been
well,
listening for a while now, and Chris had his other podcast before, but now he's just doing Young Guns, which I think was a smart idea because his mind is more hockey focused instead of doing like 9 million different topics. But here, and I'm ready to talk, boys.
It worked out at the end, right?
So,
No,
as you guys know, the Montreal Canadiens have prospects such as Sean Farrell, Riley Kidney. You could even throw in Cole Caulfield because, I mean, he's still pretty much a rookie. Masak.
my
You have
sack.
Mysak.
Mysak.
Yeah. You have Ty Smolanik. You have Jesse Lonen, Emil Heineman, Blake Blondie, Joshua Roy. You have Luke Tuck, Cam Hillis, Raphael Harvey Pernard, Oliver Kapanen. In terms of defense, you have Jaden Strubel, you have Logan Mailloux, Matthias Norlinder, Justin Barron, Alexander. No, I wouldn't consider him. Kaiden Guhle, Josh Brook, Jordan Harris, and I mean, there's probably a couple that we're missing as well today.
Pretty
So,
good prospect pool, honestly.
in my mind, when looking at this, I mean, this is not as a biased Montreal Canadiens fan, but realistically, when you look at the prospect pools around the league, the Canadians probably have the best defensive prospect pool in the league. It's very, very deep, and especially on the left hand side of the defensive core. So maybe one of those guys eventually have to get traded in terms of a blockbuster deal to acquire maybe a forward or another offensive prospect. But they're very deep on the left side. So I'm going to be starting off with Kaiden Guhle, who currently plays for the Edmonton Oil Kings, age 19 years old, 6'2", was drafted in 2020, the first round, 16th overall. So Guhle, he has size, strength, very physical player, um, he fits the fabric of Shea Weber in terms of leadership. His offensive game is not, the greatest, but in terms of like being a shutdown defenseman, he has all the tools necessary to succeed in the NHL. My projection for Kaiden Guhle is a smart, defensively strong, top pairing defenseman who's going to eat a lot of minutes. And I don't know what you guys have to say about that, but I mean, I'm very confident in terms of Kaiden Guhle.
I mean, you want me to go first?
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
got it.
You're the guest.
I honestly, like, I've been covering the Habs, covering on my Insta.Canadiens and my Twitter for almost 10 years now. And something that I've realized in the last, 4 or 5 years is, the Canadiens were pretty garbage for a while, and they stockpiled in a lot of position. And defensively, when Markov was there, and I mean, we got Weber, age was a huge factor, So when it came to the draft, they were drafting, bigger guys, and I think a little bit different. I mean, when they were drafting guys like McCarron, they just went for size, but now size is almost secondary when they're drafting. Obviously skills first, but I think Kaiden Guhle is going to be a pretty good prospect. I mean, I thought he was Swedish at first, but he's actually born in Edmonton. No, he kind of looks like Jesse Alonen and all those guys. He's very blonde. Anyways, I thought he was Swedish, but honestly, I think just in general of everything, the Canadiens have so many prospects, and alluding to what you said before, Chris, that they're going to have to give one up. I mean, the only problem with having so many good prospects is that the opportunity is not going to fully be there. So I think next training camp is going to be a huge moment for the Montreal Canadiens because, I mean, every training camp is big, but I think the next one is big because you have a lot of guys who are 19, 20 years old. Some guys who are done NCAA. I mean, how many more seasons is Guhle going to play in the WHL? You know what I mean? I don't think the WHL is the highest skill level there is, but it's a very physical game. So when you're drafting a defender out of the WHL, you know that he's going to have grit. You know he's going to have power, in which you're kind of looking to replace with Shea Weber gone. So I think Kaiden Guhle, I mean, what is he, 6'2"?
Yeah, 6'2".
6'2". I mean, it's not the biggest for a defender, but I mean, it's the way you use your size, right? You could be 6'4" and you skate like a pylon. You know what I mean? So it's all how you use your size when you're defending. I haven't watched much games of Kaiden Guhle. It's more about what I've seen on Twitter and stuff like that. But he seems to be a decent prospect, and like I said, when it comes to prospects, time will tell. And I think the biggest point, I mean, you could look at their stats in the WHL, you could look at some highlights and stuff, but it's more about when they come to this level. And I think with guys like Martin St. Louis, and I feel like there's a new aura around the Montreal Canadiens. Rather, before the prospects were, there was a certain structure that the Canadiens had, and a lot of the prospects felt like they couldn't break that barrier. But now it's like, hey, this team is rebuilding. Everyone's young. Everyone has an opportunity. So, I mean, a guy like Kaiden Guhle, I think time will tell, but definitely in next year's training camp is going to be where you're going to see kind of where he's going to fit on this team, whether it's with the Laval Rocket next year or the Montreal Canadiens.
Well, I think I like Kaiden Guhle. I mean, I think we saw a little bit of him last year in the bubble with the Rocket. He played a few games with the Rocket, and I think he looked good in the games that he played. For me, I think with Kaiden Guhle, like the comparison of Shea Weber kind of makes a lot of sense. I mean, you know what you're getting with Kaiden Guhle, a big body defenseman, like you said. I think with the Canadiens, I mean, it's all dependent on development, right? And I think if you look at the new regime of where Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton and where they want to bring this team and how they want to develop players, I think having a development group and adding that Adam Nicholas guy as well, who seems like he's good at developing players, I think that's going to make the Canadiens prospect pool in general really, really good. And so I'm kind of happy. I'm kind of curious to see what Kaiden Guhle does. I think he's one of the more underrated prospects for the Canadiens. I think there's expectations on him, but I think in terms of how well they've done, with guys like Harris coming up and obviously Barron training for Justin Barron and then Logan Mailloux too, like the expectation isn't as high as maybe, let's say, where they were a couple of months
No, I
ago.
agree. A lot of the prospects, it happens all the time with prospects. They get hyped up on social media. They do a sick highlight and it's on Instagram and stuff like that. But I think what's different now is, especially a lot of these guys who got drafted in the Bergevin era, it's a bit different, right? Because certain players got drafted for certain reasons, and now the focus has shifted. I mean, obviously, you're a good player, you're going to play hockey, but when you get drafted by a certain regime and now there's a new regime, there's could be negatives and positives with that. Obviously, there's a positive because it's a rebuild, so that means there's more emphasis on the younger guys. But generally speaking, I think with all the guys we're going to talk about today, I feel like there's a new window, a new opportunity for them. Rather, with Bergevin's era, he was building towards a cup contender and then was like, okay, yeah, we have to draft prospects. Rather, now it's like these guys can be crucial in literally next season, the next couple of steps. So that's why I'm bringing a lot of emphasis on next year's training camp for these young guys, because literally there's only going to be X amount of spots and it's all about opportunity in pro sports, right? So you have a great prospect pool, but then it comes to this decision-making thing, right? And I mean, the GM, Hughes and Gorton are going to have to make a decision along with Martin St. Louis if he's still around, which I assume he will be. But it's all about opportunity. One bad training camp doesn't mean the prospect's done, but that opportunity you could have had to jump to that next level is tough. It's a positive and a negative. You have a big prospect pool, but sometimes just because you have a big prospect pool doesn't mean they're all going to work out. Maybe one or two, maybe even less, are actually going to cut the team. Going to make the team.
Yeah. So you guys ready to move on to the next prospect?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I just wanted to say one thing about Kaiden Guhle.
Yeah.
I mean, I have him number one on my list actually out of all the prospects that Montreal have. I think he's the best one we have. Well, listen, stats wise, Joshua Roy, we'll get into him later. He has a lot of points, but Kaiden Guhle is still a point per game player. He's got 25 points in 25 games, and he hits hard. I mean, he reminds me more of Ben Sherratt. I mean, I see the Shea Weber comparison too.
I think Shea Weber is just more the way he distributes his size to kind of like box out, the offensive players. I mean, Shea Weber, you don't want to be in the corner with him, and that's where size matters. Like I said, you could be 6'4", but it's all the way you distribute your size. If you're 6'4" and the guy doesn't care if you're going to hit him, then your size means absolutely nothing, and all of a sudden you're slower. So Shea Weber was not the fastest skater, obviously.
No.
He was one of the slowest guys on the team, but it's the way he boxes you to the side, and then his size is intimidating alone, where it's not just a fucking body. It's a guy who's going to crunch you and put you into the boards, and that's where size matters. It's the way you use it, not if you just have it.
Speaking of defense, moving on to our next prospect, someone who has actually joined the Habs recently, Jordan Harris, age 21 years old, just finished his NCAA career last week. He's 5'11", was drafted in 2018 in the 3rd round, 71st overall. He's developed into an all-around type of defenseman, very reliable in terms of being a shutdown defenseman, but also has good offensive skill in terms of like being mobile, bringing up the puck into the offensive zone. Very good skater as well. My projection for him is that Harris is likely to be a steady third pairing defenseman. Sorry, and and if he has the right partner, someone that's able to help him excel his game, I could see him moving up to the second pairing as a defenseman.
I kind of like Jordan Harris. We saw what he did in the NCAA, right? You see the stats, you see the points, you see what the fact that he captained his team too, I think plays a big part in leadership as a prospect. And I think the fact that he's 21 years old, having been a captain in the league, and obviously Kaiden Guhle was too with his team as well. But I think Harris coming in and obviously embracing this role, and obviously knowing Kent Hughes and knowing Martin St. Louis as well, I think it's going to benefit him a lot signing for Montreal. And there was some uncertainty too, with the fact that, in the Bergevin era, again, there was uncertainty about whether he was going to sign and whether he was actually going to be a part of the organization. And now he's here. I think personally, I see him more as a top 4 defenseman. And I kind of like him. I think he's a guy that can help the Canadiens on the power play too. He's got some offensive skill. I think he's good at passing the puck, and I think he's a fast skater too. So I'm a big fan of Jordan Harris. I'm kind of curious to see what he does. But I don't think he's the best Canadiens defensive prospect we have. I think there's a few other guys that are up in the pecking order, in my opinion. But,
I'm curious to see. Apparently, he's going to be playing, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think he's playing next game.
He's playing next game?
Yeah, most probably.
I think he met the team in Florida, no?
Yeah, he met the team in Florida. So he had his first practice today. He addressed the media as well.
They're in Carolina tomorrow, and then Tampa Saturday. So if he doesn't get into Carolina, he tries to start.
He's going to get into a game from now until the end of the season. I mean, if you're going to burn that last year on his first year on his contract, he better be playing, or at least a good sample size,
Yeah, and he's eligible to help Laval in the playoffs too,
which is an interesting thing, and I think that's one of the main reasons why they actually. I mean, look. That's one of the negatives or positives, depending on the way you look at it, with NCAA draft picks, right? So, I mean, anyone from the O, anyone from the WHL, anyone from the Q, when they're ready to go, they're ready to go. NCAA, you kind of have to wait, Like, okay, does he want to finish his education? Does he want to make the jump now? And most of the time, what you've seen with Caulfield last year, you've seen with a bunch of players in the last 4 or 5 years, and with Jordan Harris now. Those players, it's kind of a perfect scenario for them. They get paid $900,000 American, and he's jumping on a team now where he has no pressure. It's not like we need a win, so any mistake is not going to cost us points. We kind of want to lose, so he's going to jump into a lineup now where it's pretty easy going. There's room for him. It's almost like his own personal preseason training. Like here he actually has an advantage over every other defensive guy who's not yet made the jump to the team, because some guys, they all gotta do that in the preseason, or in the training camp. He gets to do it in meaningful NHL games under even though they're losing some games, a pretty hot team regularly. I mean, they're not the greatest, but still playing, not just losing game 6-1. Every loss actually is either close or, a couple of goals or overtime losses, right? So, I mean, Jordan Harris gets paid $900,000 to just jump on this team. It's a no-brainer for him. And I think for the Canadiens, the main reason why they burnt that, whether he was going to leave or not, is exactly what Lucas said. So he could jump in with the Laval Rocket. Because, I mean, they're closing in on their season. They should be done soon. I mean, he could be a huge add for them, someone who has skill, who has a little bit of leadership. And, I mean, that's the only problem with Laval this year. I think they would have been guaranteed a playoff spot right now, is that a lot of players are moving up and down. They're a very, very good team. But when you have, key pieces just going up to the Canadiens every other time during the season, it's like, it's a little hard to have that balance and that consistency. Yeah. So I agree 100% with what Lucas said. I think one of the main things is like, come to the Canadiens, show us what you got. And then worst case scenario, which I think is actually a best case scenario, when the season's done, you go have a run with the Laval Rocket. And I think it's a win-win for both parties.
Like that, anything, Chris?
Oh no, I actually agree with every single thing he just said. I mean, the only thing, the only thing I'm going to disagree with is Chris. I mean, I don't think he's going to be a bottom defenseman. I think he's going to be top, in the top 4, like Lucas said. I think, he's very fast, and I feel like if they put him with I think him and Guhle would be a really good pair. I mean, they're gonna be a little small. I mean, 6'2" and 5'11". I mean, it's
he's 5'11", no?
Yeah, he's 5'11", Jordan Harris.
I don't think that could happen because they're both left-handed defensemen. They both play the left side.
I think Kaiden Guhle. I'm not sure if it's either or, but they could play. One of them could play both, if I'm not mistaken. I know they're both left-handed, though.
To be honest, I honestly I'm not too sure about.
I know Norlinder is he could play left and right, and I know a few of the other guys on the list too could play both positions.
I have a right-handed defenseman actually that I would like to get into right now, if you guys don't mind.
Yeah, it's all defense, anyways. This prospect pool, I mean, it's mostly defense.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So the most one of the most controversial picks of all time.
I was waiting for this one.
Logan Mailloux, right-handed defenseman, London Knights, 18 years old, 6'3", was drafted in the first round at 31 overall in the 2021 draft. His offensive game is not the only thing that stands out, but also honestly, I think he's effortless when he plays. The way he's able to move up with the puck, the way he skates. Honestly, as an offensive defenseman, I think he's the total package. And just because of what happened, the controversy, what he's done, which is totally wrong. As a human being, you shouldn't do that. But as a player, I think as a defensive prospect in terms of being offensive, I think he's a total package, and I think he will be a top pairing defenseman, and I think he has star potential.
I'll actually kick this off here. I actually think he's the highest on this list, and I know he's one of the younger ones from the list. But I think, put everything that he's. Look, at the end of the day, people make mistakes in life. What he did, was it wrong? 100%. Should he be punished for his whole professional career, for the rest of his life, for a mistake that he made when he was 17 years old? It's like, come on, how many mistakes a lot of pro athletes have made at 17 years old that gets thrown under the bus and no one knows about? Let's be realistic here. What he did was completely utter wrong. But I'll be 100% honest with this. I think he got a lot from the internet, where I'm not going to say certain things because you know how the internet could be. But at the end of the day, he made a mistake. I think he's got a lot of hate on the internet, where most hockey players don't even get that attention, especially when you're drafted 31st overall. So look, besides what he's did off the ice, on the ice, I don't see a guy has the upside that Logan Mailloux has. Honestly, and everyone. And a lot of the Habs fan base is very, there's. I'm gonna be careful what I say here, but a lot of people are, saying he's the worst person to ever exist. Go back to the 60s and 70s. The NHL was a absolute rabbit fest of problems. You could even some guys who's outside of every arena have done whatever that guy is. Whatever Logan has done. Those guys did way worse.
Listen, there's been Habs players recently that have done way worse things than what this guy's done.
I get into it, but I think you guys
not just Habs players, but players are you get a perfect example is Evander Kane. Just look at what Evander Kane's been through, and you can kind of see similarities in terms of where players are getting hate. So I think in terms of Logan Mailloux, I completely agree. I think he's the most talented prospect the Habs have, and I think the reason why is I think if you look at every scout, and I think if you watch the draft that happened last year when they drafted Logan Mailloux and all the controversy that went around it, all the scouts had him top 10. He was the top 10 defenseman. He was in the top 10, top 15. Scouts were saying how great of a player he was, and then obviously he came out on Twitter and said, "I don't want to be drafted," and the Canadiens drafted him anyways. Right, he renounced himself, and so the Canadiens, yes. Should they have drafted him? You can have that conversation.
100%, they should have drafted him,
right? But at the 100%. End of the day, the Canadiens did what they did. They drafted him based on hockey skill and not necessarily based on the person that he was at the time. But again, they're putting rules in place for him to follow. He's getting help and medical guidance from other people in the organization. He's getting the help that he needs as well, and he's improving his personality and his character. And I think that that's all you can really ask for from a person, especially like you mentioned, the fact that he was 17 years old and everybody makes mistakes. And I think you have to look at every mistake and say, okay, which ones are the ones that are really extreme and which ones are ones that you can forgive if they work on it and they make it better. So I think in Mailloux's case, it was something that he shouldn't have done, like you said, but it wasn't something that was like, oh, end his career.
Killed someone or something, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I'm not going to use certain words because for YouTube, but I mean, look, I mean, at the end of the day, for me, what kind of gets me excited as a Habs fan is, like you said, he should have went top 10 in the draft. That's one of the things I'm going to miss from the Bergevin era is that ballsy moves. Like, go look at everything Bergevin's era has done. Some of the greatest things that he's done were things that no GM would ever do. Trading Subban. I can go down the list, and it ended off being with drafting a guy like Logan Mailloux who denounced himself. And I think Bergevin looked at that draft pick and it's like, I would regret not drafting this guy because at the end of the day, 5-10 years down the line, if he's a top pairing defenseman, no one's going to remember what happened in the past. And that's probably, besides his skill level, I think the biggest upside is he's going to have a chip on his shoulder. You know, like not only does a lot of the organization's fans hate him, but a lot of people around the NHL hate him. And I mean, for him, the only way he can prove himself to stay in the league, because what's going to happen is if he has an off game, he has a bad training camp, he has let's say he ends up playing in Laval, he causes, like, he doesn't do on ice things properly, they're just going to bring up what he's done in the past. So, exactly. I mean, looking at his stats and everything he's done, and I mean, he's 6'3", and I still think he has a little bit of time to grow. So
he's able to blow past opponents. His playmaking ability, he has one of the hardest shots in the juniors as well. Like, I feel like everything has been overlooked just because of what he's done.
No, and then if he gets drafted by Arizona, Twitter doesn't explode. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
it's the fact that it's the Montreal Canadiens, Le Club Hockey Canadien, there's a high standard, and then you have Twitter, right? So Twitter has their own voice, which at the end of the day means absolutely nothing. Because if that guy could put 20 behind the net and could freaking defend like a
people are gonna forget about him.
No one's gonna care. Yeah, and at the end of the day, what he did was wrong, but we want a good hockey team. And I think there's a lot of players in the league right now who haven't said anything on it because they know they've either done the same when they're his age, done worse. He's just the one who got caught. So every NHLer, everyone in the league, even we're talking about management, we're talking about everyone, they all know what he did was, I mean, in retrospect, is not bad. I'm saying, I'm not trying to desensitize what happened. At the end of the day, these are things that happen every single day, and he got caught. And I believe that everyone deserves a second chance in life. And what? We're going to throw this guy's whole career away for a mistake he made at 17? Like, come on now. We don't want our whole life. Anyone who says that he should never play in the NHL again, I want to see them make a mistake and then they could do nothing with their life ever again. It absolutely makes no sense. It's the complete opposite of how our society should work. You know, you'll learn from your mistakes. Your mistakes make you a better person. It shouldn't dictate your whole life. And I mean,
I completely agree.
His talent is, I think the Habs actually got lucky, I'll be honest. Maybe that could be a controversy take, but I think we got lucky. Like you said, he should have went top 10. He looks like an absolute stud out there. And I mean, he has a chip in his shoulder, and athletes, when they have something to prove, even when they have that skill level and they should be a top 10 pick, and all of a sudden I have to denounce myself and I'm the worst guy the internet has ever seen. It's like, this guy has so much to prove and he's so talented. So that's why I have him number one. And I think situational things matter as a prospect. See,
so do you guys think he'll crack the roster next year?
No, I don't. I think
well, he's not on an entry level deal. They didn't sign him, so
they didn't sign it yet. But the only difficult part about it is we don't know how the Gorton Hughes regime looks at him. Right? They didn't draft him. I mean, look, they know his talent, but one thing that we don't know yet about this regime is how they deal with those PR situations. You know what I mean? The good thing is Hughes is an agent guy, so he knows what it's like when players go through shit, whether it's on the internet or not. So I feel like if they understand that he's learned from his mistake, there's a no-brainer. I don't think he plays next year. I think they're going to wait a bit.
2-3 years, I would say.
But I think the best part of this whole situation for Logan Mailloux is the fact that Chantal Machabie works for the Canadiens now. If I was the Canadiens, I'd be creating some sort of PR thing with him going forward. And I think she's like the perfect person. One, she's female, and she's done wonders for the Canadiens so far. But I think there's a huge opportunity there for them to do something with a positive impact. Maybe even create a campaign of of him saying, look, I make mistakes. A lot of kids my age make those mistakes, and there's ways around it, and it crafts you as a human being and it makes you a better person. And let's be realistic here. Like, he did something that was wrong. So what? He's never going to play hockey again. It's foolish. It's absolutely foolish.
Yeah, I agree.
So we'll move on to the next prospect, Joshua Roy, left winger for Sherbrooke Phoenix, 18 years old, 6 foot, drafted by the Montreal Canadiens in the 5th round, 150th overall in the 2021 draft. So he's a good playmaker, but he's also a great scorer as well. He's having a fantastic season with the Phoenix. I would say that in terms of being physical and being a good puck protector, I mean, he has those abilities. And I would predict him as a top 6 forward in the NHL if developed right. If he continues at this pace in terms of production, and I think he's going to be a guy that a lot of people probably going to be very excited for because of the offensive talent that he brings, especially in a prospect pool where Montreal's, I would say, like heavily based off defensive prospects. He's the one shining offensive prospect you have that I think is going to make the jump to the NHL sooner than later.
I mean, yeah. You could go first.
No, I know what, Chris. You go. Chris, go.
Well, I mean, I think it's insane that he has 92 points in 49 games. Like, that is nuts. I mean, I know it's the Q. I mean, it's not like it's not like NCAA or whatever.
It's the games,
But it's nuts, and he could play center too. I mean, he's a center/winger, if I'm not mistaken. So, I think him, and I could see him. Like I'd say a top line with him and Caulfield and Suzuki and maybe Josh Anderson. I think he's a top. I think he's going to be a top forward. If like Chris said, though, he's got to be well developed, which is something that the Habs are not really known for. But with the change of management and stuff, we'll see where it goes. But I think he's going to be a top forward.
Under Martin St. Louis, I think he's really going to help him develop in terms of being offensively talented because he has the talent, right? Where Drouin struggled under the past regime, Joshua Roy is going to flourish under the new regime. And that's how I see it.
I think what stands out about Joshua Roy the most, and I saw Marco D'Amico's article about him as well. I saw a few things that I read about him, and he's if you look at it, Joshua Roy, it was a late pick going into the 2022 draft, and if he was born a little bit later, he would have been a draft projected this year. He would have been projected to be drafted this year, and he would have been a first round talent with the way he's playing. And I think that's what you have to look at it from that perspective. The Canadiens drafted him in the 5th round last year, right? And that in itself is pretty crazy. And the fact that he's doing what he's doing in the Q at 18 years old, putting up numbers similar to what Alexis Lafreniere was doing in the QMJHL as well, I think says a lot about him as a player. And I think, you look at where he went and why he dropped last year. There was a lot of talk about his skating and how his skating wasn't at the level that scouts wanted it to be at. And when the Canadiens drafted him in the 5th round, the Habs knew they were getting a steal because this guy had all the tools to become an offensive dynamite. It was just a matter of whether he was going to improve his skating. And I think he's done that. I think if you watch games this year, and I've watched a couple of games actually of the Phoenix this year because I've seen them on TVA and stuff like that too. He's looked decent. He's looked really, really good, and his skating looked like it's improved. So he's someone that I think is one of the more underrated prospects. And I don't know if he's going to be a top player in the NHL. I think that's still too early to tell. But he's definitely a guy with top 6 potential and a guy that I could see being a big offensive force for the Canadiens if, like both Chris said, if developed properly.
No, I agree with that. I mean, one thing that I love to look at when we're comparing stats for the Q is how many years they played in the Q, right? Even though he's 18, he's in his 4th year in the Q. And if you go look historically at players who've been playing in the Q for 3 or more seasons, that 90-point mark normally in that 4th season, that 3rd season is something that if they have the talent is obtainable. I mean, you could look at a local Laval guy like Peter Bonanito. In his 4th year, he passed Lafreniere in points, right? So when we're looking at Q points per game and all that stuff, it's very, very important to look how many years he's doing that. If he was doing that in his 2nd year in the Q, that's a whole different ballgame. In his 4th year, at 18 years old, you're basically a man in that league. It's a lot easier. I'm not taking anything away from him, but we also have to look at how many years he's playing in the Q because he understands the league, even though he kind of joined it during the COVID time. So he didn't play 4 full seasons, which I guess is an added bonus to him, right? When you're looking at his stats, because I'm just looking here at Hockey DB. In his last 2 seasons, he's only played under 35 games, right? Which is less than almost under a half, just over half of 1 season, right? So technically, he's only played 3 seasons. So saying that, I think he's going to do well. I'm just worried about a guy like him, and maybe I'm being a little bit skeptical about him. I think he has a lot of offensive talent, but he is Quebecois. There isn't much Quebecois players on this team right now. I think Drouin is out the door, so he's going to be a lot of Quebecois players are going to look at him, and there's going to be a lot of pressure. And I think because of what happened with Drouin, and I'm sure Joshua Roy has heard it since he's been playing hockey, if he makes it to the big level, there's a lot of added pressure. But I'm curious to know more about his personality, because for me, when you're a Quebecois athlete coming out of the queue with a lot of points and jumping into the Canadian system, there's a lot of pressure with that. And I feel like your character is what's actually going to take you to the next level, because he clearly has the talent. He has all the attributes, but just because you have that, clearly, like we've seen with Drouin, doesn't mean it's going to work out. Obviously, Drouin is a special case. I mean, I'm not going to say more than that, but I'm just a little bit worried for him. I'm a little bit skeptical for him. I kind of feel for these Quebecois players who come and play for the Habs, because, quite frankly, it's probably one of the hardest things to do in pro sports in this market is make the jump to this team, because there's the expectation to be a good hockey player and be a role player, and then there's this expectation that they want you to be the next Guhle player. So, I mean, with that being said, I think he's going to be a good player. I mean, I'm excited to see him play, but like I said, and look at his last name. So there's going to be a lot of pressure with him, and I hope he does good, bro. I want more Quebecois players. I think that there's a little bit of a weird narrative that goes on in the Habs community that the Anglophone people don't want any Quebecois players. That's completely false. I think that is absolutely completely false. I want any good hockey player. I don't care where they're from, and I would love for more Quebecois players to play on your team. But it's not about just having a region being represented for your team,
Or having the best of the best.
I think what the Anglophones are mad about is that they draft French players when they're not supposed to be drafting French players, like
that's where the problem gets created, right? When you're
I think that's the problem, really. I mean, that they drafted this guy at the 5th round, big steal. I mean, if they would have drafted him in the 2nd or 3rd, I mean, sure.
But he is an August born, right? He's born in August, right? So technically, he's actually, if you look at everything, he's missing a year. So like what Lucas said, he could have went, if he was this year's draft with those points, that production. I mean, he goes maybe definitely first round. And I mean, the Habs have a lot of picks. Who knows? They probably would have redrafted him in the first round this year. So it's a guaranteed steal. But I think something that you're going to see happen in the next 5 years when a lot of players get developed is from 2019 till now, it was a very weird time in hockey prospects because there was barely any games played. Like, look at Joshua Roy. That could be a gem that was found in the 5th round because of the body of work that was. There was 35 games. And there was, you know what I mean? It's like there wasn't much hockey being played. So for one, that hurt a lot of players because they didn't have that comfortability and that time to excel as a player. Yeah. But also what's going to happen is certain players are going to drop because they didn't have that opportunity. And I think he's a prime example of that.
Yeah. Well, very quickly, since everyone has had, I think we could agree so far with the list that we've mentioned as these are the top prospects in terms that are going to have the biggest impact on the Montreal Canadiens during this rebuild. But I know that we all have like a 5th different prospect. So very quickly, I just want to hear what you guys have to say in terms of like who closes up your top 5 prospects in the Montreal Canadiens prospect pool.
I have 2. I'm gonna say my 5th, and then I'm gonna say my honorable mention because they kind of correlated. I was going back and forth for the last So my 5th is Sean Farrell. Harvard University forward, United States, played for Team USA at the Olympics. I think he's one of the guys that I think could be a really big steal for the Canadiens. Drafted in the 4th round as well a couple of years ago. So he's someone that I think is extremely underrated, and I think is going to be someone that could be a pleasant surprise to the Montreal Canadiens and to their fans in the coming years. And my honorable mention is a goaltender, Jacob Dobbs, who plays in the NCAA as well. he looks fantastic. If you search up his stats on Hockey DB, or even if you've watched a few highlights, I know you can't really base it off highlights, but just how well he's played and based on some scouts that I've heard, this guy could be a legit number one goalie in the NHL. He's been really, really good. Not really talked about as much as a few other prospects, but he's a guy that, we look at the goaltending pipeline in Montreal after Carey Price, and, you've got Jake Allen and you've got Kaiden Primo, but there's uncertainty about Kaiden Primo. So knowing that Montreal have Jacob Dobbs and maybe even Frederick Decaux, I think, it eases the Canadiens in terms of goaltending depth for the future. So there's that. Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, Chris, who's your pick?
I think Matthias Norlinder is very
that's my fifth one as well.
I really like him. I think he's gonna make the jump next year. Actually, I think he's gonna be able to play.
Yeah, me too.
I like him a lot. I don't see why a lot of people don't like to mention him. I mean, like,
you know why? It's simple.
I have him as a top 4, not even as my 5th. I have him in the top 4.
It's simple why people don't like to mention him, because the sample size that was shown under Dominic Ducharme was not great, and we know that a lot of players under Dom Ducharme weren't great. So bringing in a prospect with so much hype, so much talent, and doesn't have that like wow factor when he comes to the NHL, it kind of turned off a lot of people. So, and then like having him as a healthy scratch a couple of times, not really utilizing him, then he gets injured at 1.2. It wasn't really the start that we all expected. And even for himself, it wasn't the start that he expected, coming from Frölunda, HC, 21 years old, 6 foot skater, drafted in the 3rd round, 64th overall in 2019. I see him as my projection in the NHL for this player, the second pairing offensive-minded player who's going to play top power play line minutes, and I think he could get 40 to 50 points. I don't know why. I know a lot of people say that Alexander Romanov is like comparable to Andrei Markov, but I think Matthias Norlinder is more close in terms of.
I never understood that comparison, Markov and Romanov.
Yeah, they're two different players. I think Matthias Norlinder is a better comparison in terms of comparing Markov and Norlinder, because let's be honest here, Markov wasn't the biggest hitter, and Matthias Norlinder, he's about the same height as Markov, and these guys are not going to throw their body all the time. Romanov is fearless; he does it all the time. We didn't really see that from Markov. Markov was a
Romanov reminds me more of Emelin.
Emelin was way more upside.
More upside. Yeah, I'd say that his style of play is
comparable with Emelin, whatever you want to call him. Is more about the fearness, the like he's fearless. Rather that he has a way more offensive and the defensive upside than Emelin has, but the fearlessness, throwing the body, changing the energy in the building, that's crucial, especially when you go on runs and in big games. You need guys like that. Like Markov is not going to have a huge hit that's going to make the Bell Center get up and change the energy and tell the boys, "Oh, let's get in this." That's what we're about.
Norlinder's a guy that's going to be pivotal for a power play. He's going to be the quarterback for the power play. That's how I see Norlinder, a guy that's going to put up 40 to 50 points. He's going to have some bad games here and there. But I think in terms of like their defensive prospect pool, once again, Montreal, the Canadiens have a very scary defensive prospect pool. And if they ever want to make a blockbuster deal to probably get somebody up front on offense, or maybe even a goaltender, I think they have a lot to choose from in terms of like who they want to part ways with. And like Peter was saying before, this training camp is going to be very crucial in terms of like who stays and who goes. And Peter, do you have a pick that maybe we didn't mention that
I have my last pick is the same. It's Norlinder, Matthias Linder, 100%. I feel like he's a little bit older than a lot of the other guys. He's played in Laval already. I've seen him play in Laval. I went to a game. I saw him play. He's a very good defenseman, but for me, and it's not a criteria that actually means anything. It's just for my personal preference. But there's something about that Scandinavian type of players. You're Finnish, you're Swedish, even some Denmark players. There's something about them, and I don't know it's the way they grew up or the system that taught them how to play hockey, but like go around the league, go look at all the Scandinavian, the Finland players, all the Swedish players. There's no shit players. There's no bad players. They're either average or good. So I feel like it has to do a lot with their mental, and pro sports for me is, you could be the most skilled player, but it's all about in your head. you want to take the next jump? Do you have what it takes mentally? And that type of region where they draft those players, I feel like the box that's checked automatically is the mental part. It's more about the body of work, can they make that jump? So for me, I always, and I mean, obviously sometimes I'll be wrong, but I always value the Scandinavian players way more for that reason alone. Because when it comes to playing at the Bell Center or playing big games versus Toronto and Boston, very emotional games, having guys like that from that area, and yeah, I am basically making this assumption off of where he's born, but every single time we have players from that area, I mean, I know Kotkaniemi is a different situation, but I feel like there was something behind the scenes that we didn't know was going on. But when it comes to big games and all that type of stuff, those guys, they know how to stay cool and they know how to just use their skill and become better players. And that's not the reason why I have him up there. I feel like he's a very talented player, and I feel like he's a guy that I thought he already would have made the jump, but obviously there's been a lot of change, and I'm happy he didn't make it, and he can have next season to make that full jump. But I honestly have him fifth, and then it would be Jesse Alonen. I feel like he has a lot of upside too. I feel like he's a player who kind of got thrown around a bit. We didn't know where we were going to have him, whether a bunch of situations, but he got drafted at a weird time. He kind of made the jump, but didn't, and there was a lot of management change. But going forward, there's a clear direction, and I see a spot for both of those players. So yeah, definitely Mattias Nylander and Jesse Alonen, I feel like are players that are going to go up there. I just rate Swedish and Finnish players way higher because playing in a city like Montreal is tough. And I mean, every time I see these guys play, I mean, look at Lehkonen. He's not the most talented player. I mean, I know he's gone now, but he was exactly what you want out of a hockey player. He didn't give that crazy offense, but it goes back to the mental. And I feel like in pro sports, we talk about it a lot, but I value a player's mental stability and the way he views the game over everything, because they're all talented. They all got drafted, right? So the talent's there. It's more like, could they digest the game and become pro athletes? And the Swedish and Finnish people, they produce those people. Once they make the league, I mean, like I said, go around the league. None of them are shit players. You don't see many Finnish and Swedish players in the AHL. They're kind of, they either make the jump or they don't, and they go back. So my fifth player is Mattias, and just behind him is Jesse Alonen.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you so much for coming on our podcast. It's been an honor to have you. You know, you're a guy that's worked very hard in terms of building an empire with the Insta.Canadiens, garner a lot of interest in terms of Montreal Canadian fans and NHL fans in general. So I just wanted to thank you for coming on.
Actually, but before I leave, I'd like to talk about something. So I posted, I did a post, what was it, yesterday, during the Oscars. I did this post here. Oh, this one here.
Oh yeah.
So this post, for whatever reason, it's at 8,700 likes, which is pretty high for my page. But there's 200,000 impressions, right? 188,000 of them are not following me. So it means from like the Explore page, or someone sent it to them. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is because as there's almost 100 comments on it, and it's all Leafs fans, like literally all Leafs fans. And I've been getting death threats. I've been getting. I'm not even joking. This has never happened before. I don't know how this. I think it went on like a bunch of Leafs fans like Explore page, but like this is not even Habs fans. This is like, I have Leafs fans. Go fun when this is done. Go read the comments. People have gone absolutely haywire. I've never even seen it before. And I really want to do it. I've been posting on Instagram. I mean, on that page alone, I've posted how many posts? Almost 3,600 posts. So this is the reason why I'm bringing this up. I have 3,600 posts, which is a lot. Talking about like 6-7 years worth of posts here. I've never, ever, ever seen that before. And these, I mean, if anyone's people who are watching live, go to that post. It's the second post, the second to last post on Insta.Canadiens. I've never seen this before. Like, I actually feel like the Leafs fans are, and maybe I'm stirring some shit. I don't care. But at the end of the day, like, these Leafs fans,
you and Giuseppe on the same
I feel like
podcast.
they're so. If I was a Leafs fan,
it was 3-1.
I'm not even joking when I say this, but I think Leafs fans are scared of their team because I mean,
insecure.
No, they are insecure.
I love whoever it is in the background.
They have a great
I love
team.
it.
They have a very good team. I mean, obviously defensively not so much. I mean, they're a little shaky with a goalie, but offensively, I mean, probably one of the best teams in the league, and they have a lot of momentum behind them because they do have a big fan base. But I feel like there's like a little bit of like scaredness because I feel like this year for the Leafs, and I know this is we were talking about the Habs, but this year for the Leafs is very crucial because if shit goes wrong in the playoffs, it's like how many times we're gonna kick the can like this, right? So I feel like Leafs fans are on the edge because they know that this year is actually a big year because yeah, they have a lot of young players, but at the end of the day, how much longer are they gonna kick the can in the first round? And I'm so anxious to see who they get in the first round because I feel like as Habs fans and what happened last year, it's gonna be fun to watch that.
Yeah.
But the reason why I bring this up because I didn't know that there was so much insecurity within. I know you guys spoke with the Leafs fan Giuseppe. I don't know how long ago it was, but I know.
Episode, yeah.
Sorry?
It was the last episode we had him on.
Yeah, the last episode. So I mean, look, I feel like honestly, I didn't even think there was that much insecurity with the team, but I feel like if the fans feel it, whatever the fan mojo is, obviously it's not what's going on in the locker room and on the ice, but remember this year, this playoffs is going to be in front of a lot of fans for the first time in a while. And I mean, those mistakes are going to be amplified if they do it. I mean, I went to games. Was it game 6? Was it game 6 where Kotkaniemi, or was it game 5?
Game 6.
Game 6. I went to game 6, and I think that was the game where Marner got like 3 delay or 2 or 3 delay game penalties, and there was a Leafs fan behind me, and he was like pulling his hair out. So I mean, we'll see what happens this year. I mean, I hope they lose. Honestly, I hope they lose.
Well, thank God this is a Montreal Canadiens related post. So
I said that they were going to go to the finals.
Who said that?
I said that in the last episode.
I mean,
I believe it though. Honestly, I do. As much as I don't want them to win, I see it being a possibility.
And
it's all about the goalie.
I think what sucks for the Leafs, the goalie is a huge part too. But the Leafs play such an open, wide game where it's like, yeah, they might score 4 on you, but you can go score 5 on them. So.
Well, yeah. Well, anyways, thank you so much for mentioning that story. It was, I mean, I'm sorry for that. It's very unfortunate.
I don't care. For me, it's better. The more engagement, the better. I don't care. Honestly, it was more eye-opening. I was like, they're that insecure about their team. Like, bro, it's like you have a good team on paper. Like, you shouldn't be like getting riled up from
PTSD. To be honest,
too much trauma from past years.
Too much trauma.
I mean, I mean, as Habs fans, we have a lot of trauma. I mean, last year was a little bit of like some medication for that, but.
Yes. But thank you so much for sharing that story. It was very informative for us, but also for the viewers. And yeah, guys, the Canadiens have a very good future ahead of them with the new regime of Martin St. Louis, Kent Hughes, and Jeff Gorton. It looks like they're finally prioritizing younger players and player development. And we've seen that so far in terms of how the Canadiens have been playing recently. But wait until they start a fresh season under this new regime next season. I think we're going to be very happy moving forward. So thank you so much, Peter, for coming on. Thank you once again for helping us, dissect the prospect pool. And thank you to all the viewers who checked this video out. So thank you so much, guys.
Thank you for having me, guys. It was a pleasure. And whenever you want me back on here, Chris, text me, and I'm going to be here.
Perfect, man. Thank you.
Anyways, boys,
next episode.
have a good one, eh?
Okay, bye.
Bye, guys.